Hi guys, Bree Cheyenne checking in. Welcome back to my channel if you're welcoming back. And if you're new here, hi, I'm Bree. Welcome to my channel where we talk about all things crime, mysterious, and things that are just creepy. So if that sounds like something you like or something you might like, hopefully you enjoyed this video and more to come. And just wanted to give you a lovely reminder that my Patreon is live. Link will always be in the description. Dropped a podcast talking about the murders of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, a pair of 10-year-old best friends from Soham, England. If you want to check that out, again, link in the description. But other than that, that's all I have for you guys. So I'm going to stop babbling on and go ahead and jump right into this video. Today, I'm going to be telling you guys about the Burger Chef murders. This is literally my third time recording this. The first time I recorded it, I just didn't like it, honestly. I was like, this is not good enough. So I decided to record it a second time. And then I finished recording it the second time, liked it the second time, but when I went to edit it, there was some weird buzzing noise going on and I thought my microphone was broken. And I was like, oh God. So I decided to re-record it a third time, obviously. I almost debated uploading it that second time, but I was like, I can't do this to them. So let me re-record it. And then now here's the third time, and for some reason my microphone is working fine now, so, or at least I hope. I'll find out by the time I finish this. But like I said, I'm going to be telling you guys about the Burger Chef murders. 4 Burger Chef employees were murdered, and very little is known about the details of the case, which is probably partly due to the investigation getting screwed up from the very beginning. The setting is in Speedway, Indiana, at a Burger Chef restaurant, and the date is November 17th, 1978. Speedway sits over 1,200 miles on the outskirts of Indiana, and Burger Chef used to be a pretty large chain with over 1,000 locations at its peak, competing with the likes of McDonald's at this time, but has since closed. Honestly, the nail in their coffin can probably be at least partly attributed to these murders. It was approximately midnight when a Burger Chef employee decided to visit his 4 fellow co-workers that were closing the restaurant that night. His co-workers being 20-year-old Jane Freet, described as a great leader with a heart of gold, 16-year-old Daniel Davis, a talented photographer that loved to put a smile on people's faces, 16-year-old Mark Flemings, a great friend with a great sense of style, and 17-year-old Ruth Shelton, an honest and kind soul with a creative passion for music. The employee immediately noticed that the restaurant was empty, but the safe was open and the back door was ajar. Thus, he raised the alarm. Initially, police didn't consider the case to be serious for a few reasons. The first being not a significant amount of money was stolen. It was only $581, or if you want to adjust that to account for inflation, about $2,700 in the 2020 dollar. Secondly, there was no signs of a struggle. Now, typically late night fast food restaurant robberies don't involve the abduction of the employees. Like, usually the robbers just want to get in, get the money, and get out. Thirdly, none of the employees' families received any type of ransom calls. The investigators believed that it was just a case of petty embezzlement in which the young adults just used the money to go partying. They discovered that more than $100 in coins was left in the registers, which just reinforced the idea of them going partying, because like, why would you want to carry around $100 in coins if you had $3,000 in cash? Probably not. What didn't make sense though was the purses and jackets of the women were left at the shop. Now, this was mid-November Indiana, and from what I read, it's not exactly below freezing around then, but definitely chilly enough to warrant wearing a jacket. The manager also thought the situation was odd because he considered the employees to be fairly responsible, and he wouldn't expect them to steal or leave the store in that condition. Buddy Ellwanger, who was a Speedway officer, admitted that they bungled the case from the beginning. The officers left the scene with the belief that the employees went on, a little joyride, so they allowed the next shift to clean the restaurant in order to reopen it. This meant no fingerprints, fibers, hairs, nothing was collected before the restaurant was cleaned and reopened. They did, however, get some quote-unquote photos. Later investigators noticed some stuff that was off about these photos though, like the time of day, the locations of some objects, things like that. Speedway police later admitted that they staged the photos because they failed to take any during the initial visit to the crime scene. They returned to the Burger Chef sometime later, set up the items from memory, and took the pictures then. By the time the police realized their mistake when they started to suspect a kidnapping, it was much too late, and if there was any evidence, not anymore. Lieutenant James Kramer, who worked the case from the beginning, later gave a statement saying there's nothing he would have done differently and that they conducted their investigation according to standard procedures that their department and other agencies would use. Detectives started to suspect a kidnapping when they called the employees' parents and they realized that none of them had returned home by the next day. Jane's car was found partially locked in town, with the driver's side locked but the passenger side unlocked. From that discovery, it was apparent that the employees were abducted while they were closing the restaurant. 2 days later, now November 19th, investigators' suspicions were confirmed when an elderly couple that lived in Johnston County, a 35-minute drive away from the original crime scene, found the bodies of the employees in the woods. The new theory investigators were now going off of was that they were abducted while they were taking out the trash and had driven or were driven to Johnson County before they were taken off the main road into the woods and murdered. It's possible that the murderer or murderers had no intention on killing them, given that their causes of death varied so much. To me, that also points that there was likely more than one person involved, which also makes sense because, I guess one person could contain 4 people if they had a gun, but realistically, is one person going to go rob 4 people? He probably brought someone with him, or she. Daniel and Ruth were discovered laying side by side, having been shot numerous times execution style in the head and neck with a .38 caliber gun. Jane's body was about 50 to 75 yards away, and she had been stabbed twice in the heart. The blade was later recovered during an autopsy, but the handle broke off and remains missing. Mark was found the furthest from the others, laying on his back closer to the main road. He had multiple contusions and was determined to have been beaten with an unknown object, possibly a chain, and died after choking on his blood. God, that is gruesome. Some speculated that he may have also run into a heavy object, such as a tree, while trying to flee from the abductors. His father would later say during a conversation he and Mark had while they were watching TV, Mark told him that if he was ever kidnapped, he wouldn't just lay there and die. He would fight back. Mark was the only black one, but police didn't believe this to be a hate crime, and I didn't either. None of the employees showed any signs of sexual assault, and all 4 were still found in their work uniforms. Money and watches were found on the victims, which gave an indication that robbery might not have been the only motive for the murders. The theory investigators began working off of was that this was basically a robbery gone bad. They think the murderer or murderers were just planning to take the employees hostage when one of them recognized them. Mark was covering for another employee's shift that night, so investigators speculated that he might have been the one to recognize them because the murderer or murderers wouldn't have expected him to be there. So now investigators had a second crime scene. They let the first one be absolutely destroyed, but now they had a second chance to get some potential evidence. From what I read, as different departments arrived at the scene, they drove through crucial areas. The officer that admitted they screwed it up from the beginning, Buddy Alwanger, he accidentally took home 2 pieces of identification found on one of the bodies. There were also some rumors circulating that one of the bodies was moved before a coroner arrived. On the night of the murder kidnapping, a teenage couple claimed to have seen 2 suspicious men outside a burger chef just before they closed. The couple says these men approached them to warn them that the area wasn't safe at night due to vandalism, which kind of makes me think, were they just trying to get them away from the restaurant? But heeding this advice, the couple hurried on without thinking much of it until the news broke of the murders. The couple gave investigators competing descriptions, but generally described the men to be shabbily dressed, white, and in their 30s. One man had a beard and the other was clean-shaven with light hair. A detective named Virgil Vandergriff decided to use hypnosis on the couple, completing an approximately 3-hour-long session to uncover some of those hidden memories in their subconscious minds. Despite their previous disagreement, by the time the hypnosis session was complete, the teenagers had produced quote-unquote virtually identical descriptions of the 2 men down to their weight, age, clothing, and hairstyle. These descriptions proved enormously helpful in producing sketches, and with these sketches, police had clay models of the suspects created to hopefully assist in their investigation in any way that they could. Later that year, a man named David Cathcart in a town named Greenwood, 30 minutes away from Speedway, bragged that he had been involved in the killings. Based off of this, Detective Vandergriff, while off duty, went undercover to this bar and started playing pool with David. While playing, David allegedly snapped his cue to illustrate to Vandergriff what he had done to one of the victims. Cathcart was brought in and questioned by police, where he successfully passed a polygraph test. I know that's not exactly conclusive, but it just makes me think he was lying for clout, just because he wouldn't be the first person I've read about that was lying about committing a murder for clout, which is such a weird thing that is just so weird to me, beyond me. Like, who wants to brag about murdering people? They didn't even do it. Cathcart did provide police with a list of names of people in a gang that were actively robbing fast food restaurants, including burger chefs, and whom investigators suspected may have been involved in this case. During the time police were investigating these names, they found a man who strongly resembled the bearded man composite named S.W. Wilkins. You guys, you do not understand how hard it was to try to find the names of these people. Like, every article I read, it was just like they were nameless. And I was like, I found one article that finally gave the names of these people. But other than that, any article you read about this will probably just list them as, oh, like bearded suspect or this suspect. Like, names were just so hard to find. So the night before Wilkins was due to appear for a lineup, he shaved his beard that he apparently had for the past 5 years. Wilkins also frequented an area where Jane worked at a separate burger chef. However, without his beard, the witnesses couldn't definitively recognize him, thus police had to let him go. A neighbor of his, another name from Cathcart's suspects list, and whom investigators suspected led the crew, subsequently went to prison for fast food restaurant robberies committed with a shotgun. Again, finding names for these people was hard. Even in the article I read that gave the names like Wilkins and the other ones, it didn't even give his name. It gave me 3 of the names of the 5 people, so those are the only names I have. Another associate from Cathcart's suspect list named John Deefball, I think that's how I pronounce it, who fit the description of the fair-haired man, served time for a burger chef robbery, and owned a .38 revolver that was linked to 2 other shootings. Coincidentally, 4 of the 5 suspects lived in Johnston County. Furthermore, where the murders occurred was a direct route between the burger chef restaurant and where Wilkins and his neighbor lived. An attorney for one suspect even indicated to investigators that they should take a little bit of a harder look at his client. And the son of Wilkins informed police that Wilkins allegedly gave a deathbed confession. One of the original investigators on the case, Ken York, noted that the deaths of Cathcart and Wilkins, from a suicide and heart attack respectively, came suspiciously close after the release of the armed robber, John Deefball, and who he was actually eventually killed after being shot. 2 years ago, Fox 95 was able to track down one of the remaining 2 members of this alleged crew. Again, they didn't give a name for him, but he insisted he passed 2 polygraph tests in relation to the burger chef murders. He says he has been repeatedly contacted by lawyers, reporters, and detectives about that November 17th night, and he says he doesn't know about the other guys, but he wasn't in the restaurant that night. He has rejected any opportunity to go on record to clear his name, also saying, quote unquote, they are never going to solve it. However, all of this evidence was circumstantial, and investigators didn't have any direct evidence linking any of them to the burger chef murders, nor did any of them confess, despite being offered plea deals. Honestly, I don't know why they would confess. It's obvious police had literally nothing against them. Like, they couldn't charge them even if they wanted to. Investigators from cities over, including Cincinnati, Milwaukee, Chicago, and Dallas, continue to follow leads but have not been successful in finding any physical evidence. Some speculated if the murders may have had a connection to the murder of 65-year-old Julia Skyfers, who was shot in her garage by an unknown assailant in July of that year. In an article I read, apparently this was only the 3rd in the town's history at that time, because initially I was like, why would some random ass murder have some connection to this? Like, why did people think that? But then one article I read that said, yeah, it was the 3rd in the town's history at that time. So after I read that, I was like, oh, maybe that's why, because it just was so not something that happened there, so they thought it must have been connected. Some also wondered if it was connected to several bombings that took place in Speedway in September of 1978. Ultimately, neither case was discovered to have a connection to the burger chef murders, but they did possibly have a connection to each other. Brett Kimberlin, a local musician, was convicted for the bombings. Although never introduced at trial, investigators and the prosecution believe a strong motive was to deflect from Julia's murder, as she strongly disapproved of his relationship with her daughter and openly suspected him of an inappropriate relationship with her underage granddaughter. The only witness who claims to have seen Julia's killer was her husband, who passed away shortly after her murder. He identified the suspect as William Bowman, who was a close associate of Kimberlin. An Indiana State Police task force that was appointed to the case, the Burger Chef case, disbanded in June of 1980 without having made a single arrest. In March of 1981, Jane's brother, James, was investigated for involvement with the murders after being arrested for unrelated drug charges, but he was cleared of any involvement 6 days later. In 1984, a detective named Mel Wisley received a call from a 35-year-old inmate named Donald Forrester, who was currently serving a 95-year prison sentence for rape. Forrester said he was involved in the murders and was willing to confess in order to avoid his scheduled transfer to the notoriously violent Indiana State Prison in Michigan City. Forrester, who was living in Speedway when the murders took place, was a career criminal, but he wasn't incarcerated at that time. He grew up in New Whiteland in Johnston County, again where the bodies were discovered. After confessing, Forrester also led police to the crime scene in the woods, where he accurately described the location and position of the dead bodies when they were found. He also knew about the broken handle of the knife, which was not widely publicized at the time. According to Forrester, Jane's brother, James, owed money for a drug deal, so he and 3 others went to Burger Chef to threaten Jane. Mark intervened to protect Jane, and a fight broke out outside a Burger Chef, causing Mark to fall and hit his head on the bumper of the car. Believing that Mark was dead or dying, Forrester and his accomplices decided to abduct and kill the rest of the employees to eliminate them as witnesses. Forrester said he was responsible for Daniel and Ruth's deaths and gave the police the name of 3 men he claimed killed Mark and Jane. He led the police to a river where he said he threw the gun in, but a thorough search didn't turn up anything. Forrester's ex-wife was interviewed by police, and she said that just days after the murders, Forrester drove with her out to a wooded area where he proceeded to leave her in the car while he went to retrieve several shell casings, which he ultimately flushed down the toilet upon returning home. A search of the septic tank in the house, which was now owned by someone else, turned up several spent .38 caliber shell casings. This was by far the biggest break investigators have received in this case. Unfortunately, the whole thing blew up after someone within the sheriff's office leaked details of Forrester's cooperation to the media in November of 1986. Forrester suddenly recanted days later, claiming that it was coerced, which don't even make sense. Like, he called them. How are they going to coerce you into a confession you called them to give? Like, make that make sense. What I really think happened was that after it got out, he didn't want to be seen as a snitch by his fellow inmates, so he recanted. Without Forrester's cooperation and the lack of direct evidence proving he committed the crime, he was never charged and has since died in prison from cancer in 2006. About a month after Forrester recanted, in December of 1986, Marion County prosecutor Stephen Goldsmith announced that Forrester would not be charged in the case and added that with the case going cold again, he doubted anyone ever would be. Man, he was right about that one so far. Since Forrester recanted, though, the investigation has pretty much dried up, and that's about where it still stands today. Police have pursued many leads over the past few decades, with the help of Burger Chef offering a $25,000 reward. They even set it up so that potential informants could keep their identity anonymous while still being eligible for the reward, and still nothing. On November 14th, 2018, investigators released an image of the 4.5-inch knife blade used to kill Jane, hoping that it might jog someone's memory. Honestly, I just don't see that happening. Like, if someone's memory does get jogged, like, that's a great thing, but I mean, you're talking about a knife blade from like over 40 years ago, not even the handle, just the blade. They're also now reportedly looking into any possible DNA techniques for forensic evidence. During this whole investigation, Vandegrift even sought out psychics who might be able to help, in which he says one woman looked at over 100 people and picked out whom she thought might be involved. He says she pointed to several suspects investigators had at the time, but nothing much else came from that, it would seem. Indiana State Police continue to actively investigate this crime, and anyone with any information can contact investigators at 317-899-8510 or Crime Stoppers of Central Indiana at 317-232-TIPS or 8477. That's all I have for you guys today. Like I said, many details about this case are unknown. Like, there's really no physical evidence to talk about, barely any suspects to talk about. So hopefully they get somewhere with this case and they solve it. But until then, this case remains unsolved. Hopefully I'll see you guys back for the next one. Thank you for staying if you did. Bye.